Now, if you do have an aquarium, something that we really recommend doing on a semi-regular basis is just making a nice video of your aquarium running. And in the video, we want to see what's going on with your filters. We want to see all your products and so forth. And then if we can look at what's going on, and we definitely want to see your fish food. So make sure you show us in the video all your products. So then bring us a sample of water down, and then we can test your water, and then we can look at the video, and then we can just guide you to make sure that your fish stay healthy. So basically, fish keeping is 50% water quality, which we can manage for you by testing and looking at your aquarium. And we can do that from the shop. And it's 50% food quality. So this food here, Spectrum, this is about as good as it gets. Feeding good quality food is the first key to an aquarium. And I say that because I spend day in, day out going to people's houses. And it's very common that I get to someone's house and I look at the fish and they look great. And then I test the water and it's terrible. And then I look at the food and there's good quality food. Then I can go to literally the next house, all the fish are dying. I test the water, it's much better than the last house. And then I check the food and it's not good food. So the first thing I'll say about fish keeping is it is 50% food quality. So if you go and buy yourself good quality food like New Life Spectrum or potentially Danichi, and then just bring us a sample of water in every now and then we can just guide you and make sure that your fish stay nice and healthy. So a sample of water in a video, and then we can make sure your fish are nice and happy. So the nitrate in this aquarium is almost zero. So the ammonia and nitrite is broken down by the filter. And one of the most important things that the ammonia and nitrite breakdown needs is oxygen. So it's really important that the top of your tank is well agitated, just like this one is. And it's really important that your KH level is not zero, and try not to overdose water agent too much. So if you want to have nice, healthy, good bacteria, we want lots of oxygen, we want not zero KH, and we don't want to go silly with water ager. So once again, we just discussed pH and KH working together, and then we discussed ammonia and nitrite. They're mainly for new tanks. If your tank is running well and you haven't added anything new, it's probably unlikely that you're gonna have ammonia or nitrite, as long as your filters are performing well and as long as your tank is not underfiltered. Then you've got nitrate, and nitrate is basically a result of a build-up, which if you do water changes, will diffuse. So trying to not let your nitrate get too high is a really good thing, and water changes are the best way to do that. And then the last thing to discuss is GH. So you want, for a fish like this, I like a general hardness of about 8. I did test this one and it was right. I can't remember the test off the top of my head, but I remember being happy with it. But the GH is your general hardness, and there's products like this one that are wonderful, and these also contain salts, because most fish, freshwater fish, will do a lot better with a little bit of salt in the water, because the salt is wonderful for their immune system and their body slime and nitrite detoxification and a whole lot of stuff. So putting a little bit of salt in your water is a really, really good idea. And when you bring a sample of water to the shop, you can ask them to check your salinity. As long as it's not zero, then I'm pretty happy. So there's just a bunch of things to consider as far as testing your aquarium is concerned. And if in doubt, bring us down a sample of water in a video. And if you just hit search on this channel, there'll be lots of other videos on this topic. But fish keeping is 50% water quality and 50% food quality. So what do you want to test if you have a goldfish aquarium like this one? So bringing a sample of water and a video down to the shop is the easiest thing to do. But if you are going to get your own test kits, then the things that you want to be concerned about. If it is a new aquarium, the first thing that you'd want to be testing is obviously pH. Now, Sydney tap water has a high pH. Over time, the pH tends to fall. So these fish like the water slightly alkaline. So if you test the water and it's a little bit of a blue color, we're happy. If it's green, we're happy. If it's yellow, we're not happy. So therefore, you'd want to be doing more regular water changes and potentially raise your KH. because KH is going to stabilize pH. So the first thing we'll talk about is pH. pH is the acidity of the water, and then the KH buffers the pH. So if you get your pH right and you don't get your KH right, then your pH is just going to fall. If you get your pH right and get your KH right, then your pH will be stable. So it is really important your KH level is not 0. So in a perfect world, in an aquarium like this one, I'd want the KH to be about 4 to 6. This one is currently too low, so we're going to add that one. And so those two sort of work together. Now the next thing you might want to test is ammonia. Ammonia is first degree fish waste. In a very well established aquarium like this one, you're pretty much not going to get ammonia unless something goes wrong. The ammonia is going to break down by bacteria that grows in the filter. It is important the filter is never cleaned with tap water, because the chlorine in the tap water is going to kill the bacteria, and then that's not going to work. It's also important you don't overfeed them and so forth like that. So the ammonia is going to break down by the good bacteria into nitrite. So the nitrite we also don't want, so we want that to be 0. And because this is a good established aquarium, we have no nitrite. Then the nitrite breaks down into nitrate. And then nitrate is basically going to build up in the aquarium. There are products like Marine Pure and Polyfilter that would help a bit. But ultimately, water changes are in order if your nitrate is up. So this is... Now, one topic that we do hear about every now and then is fish growing to a certain size within the aquarium. Now, that seems to be a reality. For example, this goldfish is about 8 years old, and it is very small considering it's 8 years old. In the wild, the Casurus auratus would typically live 4 to 7 years, and it would grow the best part of 30 centimeters in the wild. Now, this fish here is very, very little compared to an adult goldfish, even though it's an old goldfish. And scientists have proven that various hormones like pheromones and phenols and so forth build up in water and actually stunt fish's growth. And that's exactly the same as what happens with a bonsai plant. You can get a tree that grows very large, put it in a small pot, and it will only grow to a certain size. So there's a fair amount of science behind the fact that this happens. Now, there's also lots of theories that people say that this goldfish would argue with. For example, people will say, oh, the body stops growing and the organs don't. Now, I've seen absolutely no evidence at all that that's the case, because I've been involved in countless fish like this one that's 8 years old in a tank, very healthy fish, and it has not outgrown the tank, and it's showing no adverse signs of health at all. Like, it's well portioned. There's no way you can say that the organs are continuing to grow. And then other people will say, oh, the eye will keep growing and the eye will be disproportionately large. Now, looking at this fish, I don't think the eye looks any different to any other fish which is that size. Now, my mum had a very good example of this as well. She had a yellow tang in a tank, probably not, well, it's bigger than this, but not heaps bigger, and it only ever grew to about that big, and she had it for 13 years, which is about double the natural life of that particular fish. So as far as fish not outgrowing the aquarium is concerned, then that is something we've absolutely experienced, and fish do seem to stunt, and that doesn't necessarily affect them. So I'm not saying that there's never been an adverse adverse effect from having the fish in a tank smaller than they should be, but as far as happy fish are concerned, this is a very healthy, very happy fish, and for its age, it looks absolutely wonderful.
I do think he is losing his colour though.
Yeah, that's not unusual. Like, goldfish are full of recessive genes and will commonly change and lose colour, and that's not a reflection of health. That's just something that does happen. So that does happen. So put a little note on the bottom of this video and tell us your experience of fish growing out of tanks or not. And it definitely does vary by the fish. Like if you put koi in a tank like this, they will seem to grow disproportionately large, or something like an Oscar will tend to grow disproportionately large, while other fish seem to not grow too big and seem to live happy, healthy lives. Anyway, feel free to comment on the bottom of this video. Now, the natural goldfish, which is a fish found in China, is a bronze comet. So it's just a bronzy, plain looking fish that pretty much looks like this one. They grow to about 30 centimeters long, and they live in basically any conditions, including water, which is frozen over at the top. Now, the Chinese, over the last 1,000 years, have bred these fish, and they have been fairly instrumental in helping to understand genetic diversity and so forth. By what they've done is breed these fish, and then over time, whenever they've noticed any sort of mutation in the fish, they have put those muted ones together that look slightly different, and then actually line bred the fish into different species. And there is evidence of them starting to understand this as far as 700 years ago. So they started to understand that if you get a funny looking goldfish and you put it in a pond with another funny looking goldfish, you breed a goldfish that looks slightly different to the goldfish. And that's been going on in Japan with the koi or the carp, and in China with the goldfish. And they've created all sorts of very interesting goldfish now that are all bred from the original goldfish. But what you need to be aware of is the further you get away from the original goldfish, the less hardy the fish are, because the more recessive genes they tend to hold and the less robust they tend to be. So especially some of the newer, very fancy goldfish species, don't expect them to be hardy. They die very easily. Whereas the original goldfish, more like this one's a comet, this one's a fairly original goldfish, they tend to be very hardy. Whereas something like a black moor is far from the original goldfish. I'm looking for the black moor. He is black, so he blends in. Come on, buddy, smile. Where are you? There he is. There is the black moor. Black moors are definitely not as hardy as a goldfish. So if anything goes wrong, it tends to be the black moor that dies, not the goldfish. And then some of the more fancy goldfish, if something goes wrong, it tends to be them that dies. So the reality is some fish are hardier than others, and how dominant their genes are is one of the reasons why. And that's the same with, for example, cats and dogs. So cats and dogs are by and large bred by people as pets, the same as goldfish are bred by people as pets. For example, this black moor, it may not survive in the wild. It wasn't evolved to survive in the wild. It was designed to survive in captivity. And same as dogs and cats. Most breeds of dogs and cats are bred by people for people. So at the end of the day, the fancier your goldfish, the less hardy that you can expect it to be. Now, one thing to bear in mind is the lifespan of various fish. Now, these little fellas here, the zebra-danios and mountain clouds, by and large, if you get 1 or 2 years out of them, that's a pretty normal life. You certainly get stories of individuals living much longer, but it definitely isn't what you expect. It is not the average. So time goes so fast, and often you'll buy a little school of these sorts of fish, whether they be tetras, whether they be zebra-danios or mountain clouds or whatever, and over a period of year or years, if you find that they're dying off, that's very normal, and it is no reflection at all on you or what you've done. So something like a goldfish, they tend to be living sort of 4 to 7 years in the wild, and you certainly hear stories of them living longer in an aquarium. Whereas your smaller ones, if you're getting 1 or 2 years out of them, that's sort of what you expect. But you absolutely can and do hear stories of them living much longer than that. So anyway, put a little note on the bottom of this video and tell us what fish have you had to their full life, and what is the full life of whatever species it is that you're actually keeping. But if you just do a bit of Googling and just be a little bit realistic with how long your fish should live, and you do find that as the fish get older, sometimes they do have a change in their behaviour, which is very easy to relate to as far as fish getting old. They start looking older and sometimes even start acting older. Like for example, this guy, he likes to have an afternoon nap because he's getting pretty old, particularly for this tank. And he never used to afternoon nap, but he decides these days he goes off behind here and has an afternoon nap, which I'm sure we can all relate to, especially as we get older.